The dust kicked up by my horse's hooves caught the last rays of the setting sun as I rode toward the small town of Millbrook, Texas, in the autumn of 1885. My name is Jake Morrison, and at 34, I'd spent the better part of my adult life working cattle ranches across the Southwest, saving every penny I could toward my dream of owning my own spread. After 15 years of hard work, I'd finally managed to purchase a modest ranch just outside Millbrook. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, and that meant everything to a man who'd grown up with nothing. I'd been in town picking up supplies when I heard the commotion coming from the direction of the old Methodist church. Raised voices, the sound of someone crying, and an undercurrent of tension that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. In a town the size of Millbrook, where everyone knew everyone else's business, disturbances like this were rare and usually meant trouble. As I rounded the corner onto Main Street, I could see a crowd gathered outside the church. At the center of the disturbance was a young woman, maybe 19 or 20, with auburn hair that caught the dying sunlight like fire. She was dressed in what should have been a wedding dress, but the white fabric was torn and dirty, as if she'd been struggling. Her face was streaked with tears, and she was backing away from a large, rough-looking man who was advancing on her with obvious intent. "Now, Lily," the man was saying in a voice that carried clearly across the street, "you signed the papers, and the preacher's waiting. Time to stop this foolishness and do your duty." "I won't," the girl Lily cried out, her voice breaking with desperation. "I told you, I changed my mind. I don't want to marry him." "What you want don't matter," said another man, older and better dressed, who I recognized as Cyrus Blackwood, one of the wealthier landowners in the area. "Your PA owed me money, and this is how you're gonna pay it back. Harold here is willing to take you off my hands, and that settles the debt." I felt my jaw clench as the situation became clear. This wasn't a wedding, it was a business transaction, with this young woman being traded like livestock to settle a debt. The man she was being forced to marry, Harold, looked to be at least 20 years her senior, with cruel eyes and hands that kept reaching for her despite her obvious fear and revulsion. "Please," Lily begged, looking around at the crowd of townspeople who were watching but doing nothing to help. "Someone, please help me. I don't want this. I never agreed to this." But the crowd just stood there, some looking uncomfortable but unwilling to interfere in what they saw as a legal matter between Blackwood and the girl's family. In that moment, I saw something in Lily's eyes that reminded me of a wild horse I'd once seen being broken. The desperate look of something beautiful and free being crushed by forces beyond its control. I'd never been one to stick my nose into other people's business, but something about this situation, about the fear in this girl's eyes and the casual cruelty of the men trying to force her into marriage, wakened something protective in me that I hadn't felt since the war. I dismounted and pushed through the crowd, my spurs jingling with each step. "Seems to me the lady has made her feelings pretty clear," I said, my voice carrying the authority of a man who'd faced down rustlers and worse in his time. Blackwood turned to look at me, his eyes narrowing as he took in my worn but clean clothes, my gun belt, and the confident way I carried myself. "This ain't your concern, cowboy. This is a private matter. When a woman's crying for help in the middle of the street, it becomes everyone's concern," I replied evenly. "And from where I'm standing, it looks like she's made it clear she doesn't want to marry your friend here." Harold stepped forward, puffing out his chest in what I supposed was meant to be an intimidating manner. "She's gonna marry me whether she likes it or not. Her pa signed the papers before he died, and Blackwood here holds the debt. It's all legal and proper." "Legal maybe," I said, never taking my eyes off him. "But there's nothing proper about forcing a woman into marriage against her will. That's not marriage, that's slavery." "You calling me a slaver?" Harold snarled, his hand moving toward the gun at his hip. I smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "I'm calling you a man who thinks he can buy a woman like she's a piece of property, and I'm telling you that's not going to happen today." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. I could see Harold calculating his chances, weighing his desire to save face against the very real possibility that he was about to bite off more than he could chew. I'd been in enough fights to know when a man was working up his courage, and I could see Harold wasn't quite ready to draw on me. "This is ridiculous," Blackwood interjected, clearly trying to defuse the situation before it escalated into violence. "Morrison, isn't it? I know you just bought the old Henderson place. You don't want to make enemies in this town over some girl you don't even know." "Maybe not," I agreed, "but I also can't stand by and watch a woman be forced into something against her will. So here's what's going to happen. The lady is going to come with me, and you're going to let her go." "Like hell she is," Harold exploded. "I paid good money for her." "Then you wasted your money," I said flatly, "because she's under my roof now, and anyone who wants to take her is going to have to go through me." The words surprised me even as I said them. I hadn't planned to make such a declaration, but something about Lily's desperate situation had triggered every protective instinct I first possessed. I looked over at her, seeing hope beginning to replace the despair in her green eyes. "You'd do that?" she whispered. "You'd help me?" "Yes, ma'am," I said firmly. "No woman should be forced into marriage, and I'll be damned if I stand by and let it happen while I can do something about it." Blackwood's face was turning red with anger. "You can't just take her, Morrison. There are legal documents, Legal documents signed by a dead man to sell his daughter like cattle, I interrupted. I don't think any judge worth his salt is going to uphold that kind of arrangement, especially when the woman in question is clearly unwilling. I could see the crowd beginning to murmur among themselves, some nodding in agreement with my words. It seemed that while they'd been unwilling to act themselves, they weren't entirely comfortable with what they'd been witnessing either. Besides, I continued, seems to me that if Miss ... I looked at Lily questioningly. Lily, she said softly, Lily Patterson, if Miss Patterson here chooses to come with me of her own free will, there's not much you can do about it legally. She's of age, isn't she? I'm 20, Lily said, straightening her shoulders and finding her voice. And yes, I choose to go with Mr. Morrison. I'd rather take my chances with a stranger who's shown me kindness than be forced to marry a man I despise. Harold's face was purple with rage now. This ain't over, Morrison. You can't just waltz into town and steal another man's bride. I'm not stealing anything, I said calmly. I'm offering protection to a woman who needs it, and as for it not being over well, that's up to you. But I'd think real careful about what you do next, because I'm not in the habit of backing down from bullies. I extended my arm to Lily, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. I could feel her trembling, whether from fear, relief, or the cool evening air. I couldn't tell, but she held her head high as we walked toward my horse, ignoring the angry shouts from Harold and Blackwood behind us. Can you ride? I asked her quietly. Yes, she replied. My father taught me when I was young. I helped her up onto my horse, then swung up behind her. As we rode out of town, I could hear Harold still shouting threats and promises of revenge, but I didn't look back. I had more pressing concerns, like figuring out what I was going to do with the young woman I'd just promised to protect. The ride to my ranch took about an hour, and for most of it, we rode in silence. I could feel the tension gradually leaving Lily's body as we put distance between ourselves and the town. But I knew she had to be wondering what she'd gotten herself into by trusting a complete stranger. Mr. Morrison, she said finally, as my ranch house came into view in the moonlight, I want you to know how grateful I am for what you did back there. But I also want you to know that I don't expect ... that is, I won't assume that your kindness comes with any ... expectations. I understood what she was trying to say, and I felt a surge of respect for her courage in addressing the subject directly. Miss Patterson, I said firmly, I want to make something clear right now. I offered you protection, nothing more and nothing less. You'll have your own room, your privacy, and my word, as a gentleman, that you're safe under my roof. What happened back there in town made me sick to my stomach, and I'd cut off my own hand before I'd treat a woman the way those men were treating you. I felt her relax against me, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. Thank you. You have no idea what that means to me. As we approached the ranch house, I found myself wondering what I'd gotten myself into. I'd acted on instinct back in town, driven by a sense of justice and an inability to stand by while an innocent woman was being victimized. But now I had to face the practical realities of the situation. I had a young woman who was essentially a stranger, depending on me for protection from men who clearly weren't going to give up easily. I had a ranch to run, a living to make, and now I had someone else to think about and provide for. It wasn't going to be easy, but as I helped Lily down from my horse and saw the gratitude and trust in her eyes, I knew I'd made the right choice. Welcome to the Double M Ranch, I said, gesturing toward the modest but well-built house. It's not much, but it's home, and as long as you need it, it's your home too. Lily looked around at the ranch buildings, the corrals, and the wide expanse of land stretching out under the starlit sky. For the first time since I'd seen her, she smiled a real smile that transformed her face and made her look like the young woman she should have been allowed to be. It's beautiful, she said softly, and it feels ... safe. It is safe, I promised her, and it's going to stay that way. As we walked toward the house, I couldn't help but wonder what the morning would bring. I'd made enemies in town today, and I knew Harold and Blackwood weren't the type to give up eyes, but I'd also made a promise to protect Lily, and I intended to keep it, no matter what it costs me. What challenges will Jake face as he protects Lily from those who want to force her into marriage? How will their relationship develop as they learn to trust each other? Will Blackwood and Harold accept defeat, or will they escalate their efforts to reclaim what they see as their property? Don't miss the next chapter to see how far a cowboy will go to protect an innocent woman. The first light of dawn was creeping through the windows of my ranch house when I woke to the sound of someone moving quietly in the kitchen. For a moment, I was disoriented. It had been so long since I'd shared my home with anyone that the sounds of another person felt foreign. Then I remembered the events of the previous evening, and I realized it must be Lily. I'd given her the spare bedroom, the one I'd originally intended as a guest room but had never had occasion to use. It was small but comfortable, with a good bed and a window that looked out over the eastern pasture. I'd made sure she had everything she needed: clean blankets, a wash basin, and most importantly, a strong lock on the door so she could feel secure. I dressed quickly and made my way to the kitchen, where I found Lily standing at the stove, still wearing the torn wedding dress from the night before. She'd managed to clean most of the dirt from the fabric and had pinned up the tears as best she could, but it was clear she needed proper clothes. "Morning," I said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, and I could see she'd been the desperate tears of the night before, but the quiet tears of someone processing what had happened to her. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison. I hope you don't mind. I found some coffee and thought I'd make breakfast. I wanted to do something to thank you for your kindness." "You don't need to thank me by working," I said, though I had to admit the coffee smelled better than anything I'd managed to brew for myself. "And please, call me Jake. After what we went through yesterday, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Jake," she said, testing the name. "And I'm Lily, of course. And I do need to work. I need to feel useful. I've been taking care of myself since my father died 6 months ago, and I can't just sit idle while you provide for me." I studied her face, seeing the determination there alongside the lingering fear. This was a woman who had been knocked down but wasn't broken, who was already thinking about how to rebuild her life rather than wallowing in self-pity. "All right," I said, "but first we need to get you some proper clothes. That dress has seen better days, and you can't work around a ranch in wedding attire." Lily looked down at herself and managed a small laugh. "I suppose I do look rather ridiculous, but I don't have anything else, and I certainly can't go back to town to shop. I've got some old shirts and pants that might work temporarily," I offered. "They'll be too big, but they'll be more practical than what you're wearing. And I've got a friend who might be able to help with more suitable clothing." As we ate breakfast, which was indeed much better than my usual fare, Lily began to tell me more about her situation. Her father had been a small farmer who'd borrowed money from Cyrus Blackwood to keep his land during a bad drought. When the crops failed again the following year, the debt had grown beyond his ability to pay. "Father was a proud man," Lily said, staring into her coffee cup. "He couldn't bear the thought of losing the land that had been in our family for 2 generations. So when Blackwood offered to forgive the debt in exchange for me marrying Harold Grimsby, Father agreed without even asking what I wanted, and you had no say in the matter." "Father said it was my duty to the family," she replied bitterly. "That Harold was a good man with steady income, and that I should be grateful someone was willing to take on a woman with no dowry. But Jake, you saw Harold yesterday. He's cruel and crude, and he made it clear that he expected me to be obedient in all things." I felt that familiar anger rising in my chest. No woman should be bartered away like livestock regardless of family debts. "Your father was wrong to agree to such an arrangement without your consent." "I know that now," Lily said. "But at the time, I felt trapped. Father died before the wedding could take place, but Blackwood said the agreement was still binding. He said if I didn't go through with it, he'd take our land anyway, and I'd be left with nothing." "Well, you're not left with nothing now," I said firmly. "You've got a roof over your head and someone willing to stand between you and anyone who wants to hurt you." After breakfast, I gave Lily some of my smaller shirts and a pair of pants that we managed to make work with a belt. She looked almost comically small in my clothes, but they were practical and clean, which was what mattered. I also gave her one of my old hats to keep the sun off her face. "I look like a scarecrow," she said, catching sight of herself in the mirror. "You look like someone ready to work," I corrected, "and that's more important than fashion out here." I spent the morning showing Lily around the ranch, explaining how I ran the operation and what needed to be done each day. She was a quick learner and clearly no stranger to hard work. She'd grown up on a farm, after all, and many of the skills translated well to ranch life. "How many head of cattle do you run?" she asked as we walked through the main pasture. "About 200 right now," I replied. "It's not a huge operation, but it's enough to make a living if I'm careful. I'm hoping to expand over the next few years, maybe get up to 500 head. "That's a good goal," she said. "Father always said the key to success was steady growth rather than trying to get rich quick." I was impressed by her practical knowledge and her willingness to learn. By midday, she was helping me repair a section of fence that had been damaged by a fallen tree, working alongside me as if we'd been partners for years, rather than strangers who'd met the day before. It was while we were working on the fence that we saw the dust cloud on the horizon, moving in our direction. I straightened up, shading my eyes with my hand as I tried to make out how many riders were approaching. "Jake?" Lily's voice was tense with worry. "Is that?" "Probably," I said grimly. "Go back to the house, Lily. Lock the door and stay inside until I come for you." "I'm not leaving you to face them alone," she said, her chin set stubbornly. "Yes, you are," I said firmly. "This is exactly the kind of situation I was talking about when I said you were under my protection. Now go." Reluctantly, Lily headed back toward the house while I waited for our visitors. As they got closer, I could see there were 5 of them: Harold Grimsby, Cyrus Blackwood, and 3 men I didn't recognize, but who had the look of hired guns about them. They rode up to where I was standing and formed a semicircle around me, clearly trying to intimidate me with their numbers. Harold was in the center, his face still flushed with anger from the night before. "Morrison," he said without preamble, "you've got something that belongs to me, and I want her back." I don't have anything that belongs to you, I replied calmly. I have a guest who chose to come here of her own free will. That girl is promised to me, Harold snarled. There are legal documents that were signed without her consent, I interrupted. And last I checked, slavery was abolished about 20 years ago. You can't own a person, Harold. Blackwood leaned forward in his saddle. Morrison, you're new here, so maybe you don't understand how things work. I hold the debt on the Patterson land, and the agreement was that Harold would marry the girl in exchange for forgiving that debt. It's a legitimate business arrangement. It's human trafficking, I said bluntly, and it's not going to happen. One of the hired guns, a thin man with cold eyes, spoke up. Seems to me you're outnumbered, Cowboy. Maybe you should reconsider your position. I looked at each of them in turn, my hand resting casually near my gun. Seems to me you're on my land without permission. Making threats? Maybe you should reconsider yours. We don't want trouble, Morrison, Blackwood said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Just give us the girl, and we'll be on our way. Can't do that, I said. Like I told you yesterday, she's under my roof now, and she stays under my roof as long as she wants to. Harold's face was turning purple again. You can't keep her. I paid for her. Then you got cheated, I said, because she's not for sale. The tension was building toward a breaking point when I heard the sound of a rifle being cocked behind me. I turned to see Lily standing on the front porch of the house, my Winchester in her hands, and pointed directly at Harold. I told you to. Stay inside, I called to her. And I told you I wasn't leaving you to face them alone. She called back, Harold Grimsby, you listen to me, and listen good. I will never ever marry you. I'd rather die first. And if you try to take me by force, I promise you'll regret it. Harold started to dismount, but the sight of that rifle barrel pointed at his chest made him think better of it. You can't hide behind that gun forever, girl, and Morrison can't watch you every minute of every day. He won't have to, Lily said firmly, because I can take care of myself. And if you come near me again, I'll put a bullet in you and sleep soundly that night. I had to admire her courage, even as I worried about the escalation. But her show of defiance seemed to have the desired effect. The hired guns were looking less confident, and even Blackwood seemed to be reconsidering the wisdom of pressing the issue. This isn't over, Blackwood said finally. There are legal remedies for this situation. Morrison, I'll have the sheriff out here with proper papers. You do that? I said. And when he gets here, I'll be happy to explain to him how you were trying to force a woman into marriage against her will. I'm sure he'll be very interested in that story. After a few more minutes of threats and bluster, the 5 men rode away, but I knew this was far from over. Men like Blackwood and Harold didn't give up easily, especially when their pride had been wounded in front of others. You handled that well, I told Lily as she came down from the porch, still carrying the rifle. I meant what I said, she replied. I'd rather die than marry Harold Grimsby, and I won't let you face danger alone because of me. Lily, I said, seriously, this is going to get worse before it gets better. These men aren't going to give up, and they're not going to fight fair. Are you sure you want to stay here? I could help you get to another town, somewhere you could start fresh. No, she said firmly. I'm tired of running, tired of being afraid. You offered me protection, and I'm accepting it. But I'm not going to be a burden. I'm going to be a partner. Looking at her standing there in my oversized clothes, her hair tied back with a piece of string, holding that rifle like she knew how to use it, I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't just about protecting an innocent woman anymore. This was about standing with someone who had the courage to fight for her own freedom. All right then, I said, partners, it is. But we do this smart, and we do it together. As we walked back toward the house, I found myself wondering what I'd gotten myself into. But looking at Lily's determined face, I knew I wouldn't change a thing. She deserved the chance to choose her own life, and I was going to make sure she got it. How will Jake and Lily prepare for the escalating conflict with Blackwood and Harold? Will their partnership grow into something deeper as they face danger together? What lengths will their enemies go to in order to reclaim what they see as their property? Don't miss the final chapter to see how far love and courage can triumph over greed and cruelty. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation with Harold and Blackwood, and the tension around the ranch had been building like storm clouds on the horizon. Lily and I had fallen into a comfortable routine, working together during the day, sharing meals and conversation in the evenings, and slowly getting to know each other beyond the dramatic circumstances of our first meeting. What I discovered was a woman of remarkable strength and intelligence, someone who had been shaped by hardship but not broken by it. Lily had a quick wit, a generous heart, and a practical knowledge of ranch work that made her an invaluable partner. More than that, she had a way of bringing light to my previously solitary existence that I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Jake, she said one morning as we worked together to move a small herd to fresh pasture, can I ask you something personal? Shoot, I replied, keeping my eyes on the cattle. Why did you never marry a man like you, kind, hardworking, with your own land? I would have thought you'd have been snapped up years ago. I was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer. I suppose I was always too focused on building something of my own to think much about sharing it with someone else. After the war, I just wanted to work hard, save money, and make something. of myself. Romance seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford. And now, she asked softly. I looked at her, sitting her horse with the easy grace of someone born to ranch life, her face tanned from the sun and her eyes bright with intelligence and something else I was beginning to recognize as affection. Now I'm beginning to think I might have been wrong about that, I said honestly. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Allotted. We both turned to see a dust cloud that suggested at least a dozen riders heading our way at a fast pace. That's not good, Lily said, her hand instinctively moving to the rifle she now carried everywhere. No, it's not, I agreed. Let's get back to the house. We drove the cattle toward the ranch buildings, but we weren't fast enough. The riders intercepted us about halfway there, and I could see immediately that this wasn't going to be a repeat of the previous confrontation. These men had come prepared for a fight. Harold and Blackwood were there, along with what looked like every hired gun they could find in 3 counties. But more troubling was the presence of Sheriff Watson, a man I'd heard was more interested in whoever paid him best than in actual justice. Jake Morrison, the sheriff called out as the group surrounded us. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of kidnapping and theft. Kidnapping, I said, keeping my voice leveled despite the anger building in my chest. Sheriff, Miss Patterson came with me of her own free will. There's no kidnapping here. That's not how Mr. Blackwood tells it, Sheriff Watson replied, pulling out a folded paper. According to this legal document, Miss Patterson was legally bound to marry Mr. Grimsby here. By taking her away from that ceremony, you interfered with the legal proceeding and essentially stole property that had been pledged as collateral for a debt. Property. Lily's voice was sharp with outrage. I am not property, Sheriff Watson. I am a human being with the right to choose whom I marry, and I choose not to marry Harold Grimsby. Now, miss, the sheriff said in a patronizing tone, women don't always understand the legal complexities of these situations. Your father signed a binding agreement? My father is dead, Lily interrupted, and he had no right to sign away my life even when he was alive. Harold urged his horse forward, his face twisted with a mixture of lust and anger. Enough talk. I've been patient long enough. Lily, you're coming with me right now, and we're going to finish what we started 3 weeks ago. Like hell she is, I said, my hand moving to my gun. But we were outnumbered more than 6 to 1, and several of the hired guns already had their weapons drawn. I could fight, but not without putting Lily in serious danger. Jake, Lily said quietly, don't do anything foolish. I won't have your blood on my hands, smart girl, Blackwood said with a cold smile. Morrison, you're going to come with the sheriff, and Miss Patterson is going to come with us. This time, there won't be any interruptions to the wedding ceremony. Over my dead body, I snarled. That can be arranged, said one of the hired guns, a man with a scar across his cheek and dead eyes. It was then that Lily did something that surprised everyone, including me. She suddenly spurred her horse forward, breaking through the circle of men before anyone could react. But instead of trying to escape, she wheeled around to face Harold directly. Harold Grimsby, she said in a voice that carried across the range, I challenge you to single combat for my freedom. The declaration was so unexpected that everyone just stared at her for a moment. Even in the Old West, it was unusual for a woman to issue such a challenge, and the legal implications were unclear. What? Harold sputtered. You heard me, Lily said firmly. You claim I belong to you like some prize to be won. Well, I say that if you want me, you'll have to fight for me. Single combat, winner take all. If you win, I'll marry you without further protest. If I win, you and Blackwood leave me alone forever and forgive any debts you claim against my father's estate. That's ridiculous, Blackwood protested. Women don't fight duels. This woman does, Lily replied, unless of course Harold is afraid to face a mere woman in combat. I could see what she was doing, appealing to Harold's pride and machismo, betting that he wouldn't be able to resist the challenge even though it was clearly a trap of some kind. But I also knew she was putting herself in terrible danger. Lily, no, I said urgently. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, she replied, never taking her eyes off Harold. I'm tired of other people making decisions about my life. It's time I took control of my own destiny. Harold was clearly torn between his desire to maintain his masculine image and his recognition that accepting such a challenge was risky. What kind of combat? He asked suspiciously. Your choice, Lily said. Guns, knives, fists, whatever you prefer. But it has to be fair. One-on-one, with no interference from anyone else. And if I refuse, then everyone here will know that. Harold Grimsby is a coward who's afraid to fight a woman for what he claims is rightfully his, Lily said with a smile that was sharp as a blade. The insult hit its mark. Harold's face turned red, and I could see his pride warring with his common sense. Unfortunately for him, pride won. Fine, he snarled. Guns it is. 20 paces, turn, and fire. And when I win, you'll do exactly what I tell you for the rest of your life. And when I win, Lily replied calmly, you'll leave me alone forever. Lily, I said desperately, you don't have to prove anything to these men. Let me handle this. She looked at me then, and I saw something in her eyes that took my breath away. Not just determination, but love. Real, deep, abiding love. Jake, she said softly, I love you. I think I've loved you since that first night when you told me I was safe under your roof. But I can't build a life with you while I'm still running from my past. I have to face this, and I have to win it myself. I love you too, I said, the words torn from my heart, which is why I can't let you do this. You can't stop me, she replied. But you can trust me, I know what I'm doing. The sheriff, who had been watching this exchange with growing confusion, finally spoke up. Now hold on here. This is highly irregular. I don't think, Sheriff, Blackwood interrupted. If the girl wants to settle this with a duel, I don't see any legal reason to stop her. In fact, it might be the cleanest solution to this whole mess. I could see the greed in Blackwood's eyes. He was confident that Harold would win, and he wanted to get this resolved without any more complications or witnesses than necessary. The duel was set up in a clearing near the ranch house. 20 paces were marked off, and the rules were established. They would stand back to back, walk to their marks, turn on the count of 3, and fire. Sheriff Watson would do the counting, though I had serious doubts about his impartiality. As Lily checked her pistol, my spare Colt that I'd been teaching her to use over the past week, I pulled her aside for what might be our last private conversation. Lily, please, I said desperately, let me do this for you. Challenge him myself. He won't accept a challenge from you, she said practically. His pride is invested in proving he can control me. But Jake, I need you to know whatever happens. Here, these past 3 weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. You showed me what it means to be valued, to be respected, to be loved for who I am rather than what I can provide. Don't talk like this is goodbye, I said fiercely. You're going to win this, and then we're going to build a life together. I hope so, she said, standing on her toes to kiss me softly. But if I don't, promise me you'll remember that I chose this. I chose to fight for my freedom, and I chose to fight for our love. They took their positions, standing back to back in the center of the clearing. Harold was grinning confidently, clearly believing that his superior size and experience would give him an easy victory. But I had spent enough time with Lily over the past weeks to know that she was full of surprises. Gentleman and lady, Sheriff Watson called out, on the count of 3, you will walk to your marks. 1. They began walking, Harold with a swagger, Lily with steady, measured steps. 2. They reached their marks and stood waiting. I could see Harold's hand hovering over his gun, ready to draw the moment the count reached 3. 3. They turned simultaneously. Harold's gun cleared leather first, but in his eagerness and overconfidence, he rushed his shot. The bullet went wide, kicking up dirt several feet to Lily's left. Lily, meanwhile, took her time. She raised her pistol with both hands, sighted carefully, and squeezed the trigger with the smooth, controlled motion I'd taught her. Her shot took Harold in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to the ground. He wasn't dead, but he was definitely out of the fight, clutching his wounded arm and cursing loudly. The silence that followed was deafening. No one had expected this outcome, least of all Blackwood and his hired guns. Well, Lily said calmly, holstering her pistol, I believe that settles the matter. According to the terms of the challenge, Harold has lost, which means he and Mr. Blackwood will leave me alone forever and forgive any debts against my father's estate. Now wait just a minute, Blackwood sputtered. This doesn't change anything. Legally, actually, it does, said a new voice from behind us. We all turned to see Judge Harrison riding up with 2 federal marshals. Judge Harrison was known throughout the territory as an honest man who couldn't be bought, and his presence changed everything. Judge Harrison, Sheriff Watson said nervously. What brings you out here? Reports of human trafficking and forced marriage, the judge replied sternly. I've been investigating Mr. Blackwood's business practices for some time, and I have to say, what I've found is deeply disturbing. He dismounted and walked over to where Harold was still writhing on the ground. Mr. Grimsby, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit human trafficking. Mr. Blackwood, you are also under arrest for the same charge, plus extortion and racketeering. You can't prove anything, Blackwood said, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, I can, Judge Harrison replied. I have testimony from 3 other families who were coerced into similar arrangements, plus documentary evidence of your illegal lending practices. Marshals, please arrest these men. As the marshals moved to take Blackwood and his associates into custody, Judge Harrison turned to Lily and me. Miss Patterson, I understand you've been through quite an ordeal. I want you to know that any documents purporting to bind you to marriage against your will are null and void under territorial law. You are free to marry whom you choose, or not to marry at all, as you see fit. Thank you, Your Honor, Lily said, her voice shaking with relief. And Mr. Morrison, the judge continued, I've heard good things about you from several sources. You did the right thing protecting Miss Patterson, and I want you to know that you have the full support of the territorial government. As the dust settled and the prisoners were led away, Lily and I found ourselves alone for the first time in hours. The relief was overwhelming, but so was the realization of what we'd both confessed during the crisis. So, I said, taking her hands in mine, you said you loved me. I did, she replied, blushing slightly. And you said you loved me too. I did indeed, I confirmed. So the question is, what do we do about it? Well, Lily said with a smile that lit up her entire face, I believe the traditional thing would be for you to ask me to marry you, Lily Patterson, I said, dropping to one knee right there in the dirt. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not because of any debt or legal obligation, but because you choose to. Jake Morrison, she replied, tears of joy streaming down her face. I would be honored to be your wife. And yes, I choose you, freely and completely. 6 months later, we were married in the same church where Harold had tried to force Lily into marriage. But this time it was a celebration of love freely given and joyfully received. The whole town turned out for the wedding, and even Judge Harrison made the trip to officiate. As we stood at the altar, exchanging vows we had written ourselves, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. It had started with a rescue, but it had become so much more: a partnership, a love story, and the foundation of a life built on mutual respect and shared dreams. I promise, I said, looking into Lily's eyes, to always see you as the strong, independent woman you are, and to stand beside you as an equal partner in whatever life brings us. And I promise, Lily replied, to never forget that love is a choice we make every day, and to choose you, every day, for the rest of my life. As we kissed to seal our vows, I heard someone in the crowd say, now that's how a real wedding should look, to people choosing each other freely. They were right, and as we walked out of that church as husband and wife, I knew that Lily was indeed under my roof now, not as someone I was protecting, but as my equal partner in building a life together. And that made all the difference in the world. A story of how true love means choosing each other freely, not being forced together by circumstance. Like, if you believe in fighting for the right to choose your own destiny, subscribe for more stories about courage, triumphing over coercion, and share to remind others that real love is always a choice, never an obligation. Legal notice. This story is completely fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. The characters, events, and situations described are products of imagination and do not represent real facts. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental.